Hello, today we have the most valuable CD find that I've had this year. It's come out of a thrift store of all places, and it certainly is one of the more interesting CD or music hauls that I've had in quite some time. Let's get into it. When I go to a thrift store, the first place I go to, if I know where it is, or where the carts are where the employees are wheeling out the merchandise that they are going to shelf. And when I spotted several early Beatles CDs, there were 8 different titles of the early Beatles. There's a duplicate of the White Album. When I spotted these 8 titles, I knew this was going to be a special day. I found a lot of other rock CDs, as you can see, everything from Roy Orbison and the Drifters to Cream, Wheels of Fire on a German pressing in the double CD, double box format, and Mitch Ryder and the Rascals and the Traveling Wilburys, and an unusual CD of Beau Brummell's compilation. This is pretty unusual to find at that thrift store anyway, so I was having a happy day. It got better. I have not priced out the Beatles CDs and the other CDs that I've just shown you. Most of those are going to end up in my collection. But when I say it got better, I had an error of judgment at first. I was overlooking something. When I saw CDs by Quarter Flash, who I never cared for, and corporate rock or arena rock, whatever you want to call it, Journey, REO Speedwagon, Boston of all things, and Electric Light Orchestra, I assumed that these were common CDs, that there would be hundreds on offering, and quite frankly, they'd never sell, and good luck even if I lotted them up. Boy, was I wrong. I believe I flipped one of these CDs over to see what was on it and found the Telltale Japanese script. The price in, I'm trying to line this up to where you can see it. It's in red there and it's very difficult to get on the camera. It's the price in yen. So that was telling me that this was a Japanese pressing. And at a thrift store like this, the corporate offerings, when the CDs make it out, the corporate offerings are usually a large percentage of what they have, and they're pretty darn worthless, and I believe the thrift store knows it. This was unusual because you could see the Beatles and the whole stack of Beatles there, including a really cool one, Beatles Live at the BBC. It's a double CD set, volume 1. That set's worth about $10. The rest of the stuff, all of it's probably only worth about $35, and 4 of those are German pressings with all the what we would call extra cuts in the United States. So ordinarily, if I hadn't flipped one of these CDs over to see the content, I'd be at a loss to tell you much about it. But I saw that and I knew that the thrift gods were smiling on me that day. I'm excited about this haul, and I call it special because in the years of frequent thrifting, I have scored more than 1 or 2 Japanese pressings only twice, including this haul. And this haul is the first time I found the early pressings. This haul is also the most valuable haul of CDs that I found during 2023, and is probably among my 5 or 10 top CD hauls ever. I plan to list the Japanese and European import CDs for approximately $750 in US dollars, obviously. This haul is definitely a rare event. So please don't quit your day job expecting to find several $100s in CDs at thrift stores on a frequent or even regular basis. A lot of empty trips went into finding these CDs. But if you already collect CDs or resell media, understanding what makes early Japanese CDs considered special is worthwhile. Let's go for it. In the early days, not only were CDs very expensive, but CD players were very expensive, and both were considered an audiophile product when Sony introduced the CDs, and for a couple years later, quite frankly. Sony introduced the world's first CD player, the CDP-101, on October 1st, 1982. The CDP-101's MSRP was 168,000 yen, which equated to $625.58 in US dollars using then current exchange rates. The price was at least this high in the US market. And the purchasing power at $625 in 1982 equals roughly $1,907 in 2023. As manufacturers expanded their product line, deluxe models were included. The CDP-101 did not even include a stop button, so I assume that the deluxe models, which sold for as much as $1,500, did. Today, collectors can buy a working CDP-101 on eBay for $500 to $600. There's some examples for $300. I don't know about the quality of those. If you buy a CDP-101, be prepared for design and build issues. The CDP-101 did not have a stop button. Listeners had to use the reset button. Nor does the CDP-101 have oversampling, which helps explain some of its appeal to collectors who want to listen to CDs without the shaping that oversampling produces. The early 101s incorporated a Sanyo STK6922 laser that had reliability issues. Sony soon replaced the Sanyo lenses with the proprietary lens, and the CDP-101 is said to be very reliable, especially for a CD player manufactured 40 years ago. If you own a CDP-101 or owned one in the past, I'd like to know what you think of it. Please tell us about it in the comments below. In a historic agreement, Sony and Phillips teamed up to develop the technology for compact digital music, the players, and the technical standards to assure uniformity between the systems. Sony management probably still bore deep scars from the Betamax fiasco. However, Phillips was unable to manufacture CDs to meet the anticipated October 1st, 1982 worldwide release for its player and the CDs that they were going to manufacture, mainly on polygram. So Sony Japan released 50 titles along with the CDP-101, limited to the Japanese market on October 1st, 1982. These are the CDs that I refer to as the first 50. Sony delayed releasing the CD player, the CDP-101 we've talked about, and the first 50 CDs and the subsequent ones into the U.S. market or anywhere else until Phillips was ready to participate in March 1983. On the interwebs, there's a lot of confusion about what's the first CD. The internet's full of contradictory information about which is the first CD. Like they can point to one particular CD and say this is the first one. That title and that example is special. Of course, the answer depends on how the writer frames the question. A German company manufactured a test pressing of a Strauss symphony, but apparently never commercially released it. But it's the first pressing manufactured. Some articles say that the first CD was ABBA's The Visitors. The Visitors was the first CD pressed, but it was not released until March 1983, several months after Sony released the first 50. The Visitors still holds the record of being the earliest album recorded and mastered digitally, though. Some commentators mistakenly conclude that Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen is the first CD. But they omit some important conditions when they're filtering this information. Born in the USA is the first CD manufactured in the United States, but it was not released until September 21st, 1984. That's almost 2 years after the first 50 were released by Sony in Japan. Even without the first 50, some writers still confuse the facts and want to pick a particular title of the first 50, normally a Billy Joel title. Let's explain that. On October 1st, 1982, Sony simultaneously introduced the 50 titles that I refer to as the first 50. These were available for sale only in Japan. So there is not one first CD released. There are 50 first CDs. If one frames the question in a common sense way, the first CD that a consumer could go into a store and purchase. Many commentators often refer to Billy Joel's 52nd Street as the first CD, because this title appears first on the list of the international pop CDs. But somebody could have looked at the suffix 1 in the catalog under the categories for classical, a Japanese pop CD, or even a field recording of steam locomotives, and that would have been just as valid as using the first CD listed in the international pop category where Billy Joel's 52nd Street was listed. So I just think that's a rather weak way of doing it. There are 50 first CDs in the way I framed it, commercially available. There's a way to identify the first pressings of the first 50 Sony CDs. You're probably familiar with the gold face CDs, where the top and the bottom of the CD are both gold. MSFL and actually quite a few of the labels produced high-end CDs as special editions. When I describe a gold face CD in this video, those CDs, the special editions and the gold face on both sides, are not at all what I'm referring to. Here's an example that is not in the first 50, but I was stunned to find this, quite frankly, what it is. Sony produced a classical CD of the Hungarian Philharmonic in a series of, I believe it's 4 CDs. This is the first title, and it's gold. When you look in the hub, it says manufactured by CBS/Sony Recorded Inc. Records Inc. So that's right on the hub, that clear plastic part in the very interior. The catalog number that is stamped into the CD right around there, but it's in such tiny print it isn't going to show in the video, is RT, standing for real time, -2001. Then there's a suffix, a -3, which rumor has it, and I tend to believe it, means it was made in 1983. There's another little trail off in there that says 1A1, which other people over on the Hoffman forums, I believe anytime you see that, you see a first mix, and that's usually on the gold, but it's quite, if it appears. But you also see it on some of the silver ones that use the same master recording but are silver-faced. Now, by silver-faced, I mean the front. If you look at the optical read area, it is silver. Excuse me, I should have said by gold face. I mean the top. That is a gold color. To give you something in the lighting so you can compare it, there is a silver-faced one of the titles in the first 50. So there we have the difference real clearly where you can see it. Sony switched to silver-faced CDs sometime during 1983, probably about a year after it introduced CDs in October 1982. And the prices of the gold face CDs to a similar condition, same title, silver face CD, I'm finding they tend to be about $75 to $100 more if they're gold faced. So there is definitely a premium on the very earliest of the early. The regular silver CDs and the gold CDs, the market's driven primarily by who the artist and title are, like any other CD. But these are considered special and command a great premium, as we'll describe later. In the early years, CD players and CDs were very expensive, which limited the market. The CDs, when I say they were expensive, I mean it. Sony priced the 22 international pop CDs at 3,500 yen, which was equivalent to $14.82 back in October 1982. Today, that would equate to roughly $45.41 in 2023 purchasing power. And the CDs were not, and you weren't getting them in the United States. You weren't able to go down to the store and buy them for $14.82. They were more like $19.99 and probably up from there. Sony's first 50 CDs include 50 classical, 12 Japanese popular recording titles, the field recording of steam locomotives. All those groups were priced at 3,800 yen, a price which equates to roughly $49.30 in today's prices. And as I said, those prices were probably higher if you went to a store in the U.S. and actually tried to buy the CDs. And as I mentioned a second ago, one article states that CDs cost $20 when they were introduced in the United States in 1983, and that would equate to about $60 today. And that's probably, I'm thinking, at the high end of what some of the 180-gram vinyl records go for. You can let me know in the comments below if I'm off base on that. I've seen them at Walmart for N30, but I would think 60 would certainly be a premium end, that some of the market is out there in that high. At these prices, it's not surprising that the CDs produced during this era are usually quite scarce. In 1983, international sales of CD players totaled only 350,000. And worldwide sales of CDs totaled 5.5 million. That's probably fewer than are being sold now. Sony and Phillips were innovators, and they intended to skin the early adapters, the audiophiles. In fact, the audiophiles, who are classical musical lovers for the most part, were about the only audience that any of the labels identified for quite a while. They weren't sure, as one British Virgin Records executive told The Guardian, "We didn't think there was any market other than classical for quite a while." They failed to identify the pop market as being realistic. But as the prices of the CD players came down, that kind of pulled the demand for CDs with it, from what I remember and what I think I see in the data. In 1984, half of the titles were classical. By 1985, the titles available on CD expanded. So 1/3 were classical, 1/3 were pop or rock, and 1/3 were everything else, such as jazz and soundtracks. As CD players and the prices of the CDs declined, the size of the market grew, I want to say exponentially. Let's just say considerably. By the mid-1980s, prices of CDs came down into the $11 to $15 range. In 1985, Dire Straits released Brothers in Arms, which became the first CD to outsell its vinyl counterpart. CD sales peaked, by 1988, CDs outsold vinyl, selling approximately 200 million CDs worldwide. In 1991, CDs outsold cassettes by selling 400 million. CD sales peaked in 2000 at approximately 943 million units. But in the early days, CDs were a big deal, especially to audiophiles. 26 Japanese press CDs that I found recently, almost every one of them will sell for at least $20. Most of the CDs are early Japanese pressings. Many of them are first. The haul that I found was over an 18-hour period. Most of them I found initially, and then I went to an ATM machine, got some more cash, and bought a few more. And then I went back the next day just to do a cleanup. In subsequent visits, I found some other CDs, probably ones that I missed the first time. I'll be doing a video on how to spot the very early Sony Japanese CDs and the subsequent pressings. I found 26 Japanese press CDs. Almost all of them, but not quite all of them, were on Sony Columbia or Sony Epic. Let's just call it Sony collectively. And 7 of them are in the first 50. Quite a few more are in that initial burst of Sony releases during the first, let's say, 90 days, maybe 6 months. The prices for the first 50 do not appear to receive much, if any, of a boost by virtue of the fact the title was included in the original offerings in October 1982. The prices are primarily driven by the popularity of the artist and the album. We'll have some examples in the CDs that I found, but let's take 2 classic Pink Floyd albums as examples. Unfortunately, my finds do not include the Holy Grail of the first 50. Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. In gold face, it sells for approximately $2,500 on Discogs. That is not just a listing price, that is also a sold price. The silver face versions have a relatively measly value of $500. These sorts of values made me curious how much a first pressing of Toshiba EMI's CD of Dark Side of the Moon would bring in the current market. It wasn't released until June 1983, and it cost in prices similar to the silver-faced version of Wish You Were Here, about $500. I'm suspicious about the price online offers for either one of these CDs. At those sorts of prices, they just seem so prone to counterfeiting, and it would probably be very easy for somebody in China or Russia to do. Barring pretty serious condition issues, almost all of the early Sony titles, even the silver-faced ones, will probably command at least $20 on the current market. And as I've said before, the gold-faced ones seem to command a $75 to $100 and up premium with, I'm going to say, no problem almost. This brings us to the haul. Let's take a look. Although Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon were not among the CDs that I found, the CDs that I found, many of them, almost every one of them, is worth listing for at least $20. One of them's worth listing for around $80 to $90, and another one's worth listing for $150. In general, the condition is very good plus. Some are in very good and, quite frankly, would probably benefit from some resurfacing as long as I disclose that when I go to the listings. The inserts are in great shape, but there are no Obis. OBI. If you're not familiar with an Obi, this is a CD from another massive haul that I had, Halloween Metal Jukebox. This is a German metal band, and this is the Obi. It's a little strip that contains a description of the product and the price, and marked up for the Japanese market. There are no Obis in any of these CDs, as I've said. Let me open it up and show you some more of what's different about a Japanese CD. If you carefully take out the front insert, this one almost has a little poster, and that's a pretty unusual. Let's just call that fairly unique to that CD. It's certainly not in the early ones. But these brochures, usually written almost entirely in Japanese, are very common. This one's bilingual, actually, which lyrics printed in English and lyrics printed in Japanese. Sometimes it can be as little as an errata sheet of one page, front and back, and that's something to keep your eye on and note whether or not you have the Obi and whether or not you have the Japanese insert to the regular front insert, which is, in this case, it's all in English. Sometimes this is also bilingual, especially on the early ones that I found. And a little tip about finding these CDs, a lot of times the Obi will be inside the front insert, and that's actually, I found, a great way to store them. So I'm going to put Halloween Metal Jukebox back in the collection. Of the Sony First 50, here are the 7 that I found. 3 of the 15 classical titles. A Mozart of the, Symphony number 38 in D minor. That'll be worth $25. The next one is a Shostakovich, and it's worth $35. And then there's the Strauss, and it's worth $24. All of these cases, incidentally, if you look at them, bear patent pending right there. And that will tell you that's the dead giveaway for an early pressing Japanese CD. There was a patent, believe it or not, pending on the jewel boxes back then. I didn't find any of the field recordings, which is a universe of 1, steam locomotives, and it goes for about $60. I didn't find any of the Japanese popular music among the first 50 titles. But I found 4 international popular music titles, 3 on CBS Sony, and then 1 on Epic Sony. So let's take it. Boz Scaggs' Middleman, it'll go for about $20. Journey, Escape, I'm going to list it for $40. Boz Scaggs, Hits, about $23 on this one. And then over on Epic Sony, we have REO Speedwagon, High Infidelity. This has got condition issues. I'm going to list it for $18. After the first 50, but in the very early titles, is indicated by catalog number 38DC33. I found Mahler's The Titan. It should go for about $20. The only Japanese pop CD that I found is the Players CD of Space Travel. It'll go for about $35. So don't discount the Japanese groups produced for the Japanese markets. Then I found many additional popular music titles, just taking them in catalog order here. Boz Scaggs' Silk Degrees, which was a classic of the disco era that is one of them that rises above disco. I put $20 on this. Santana, Shango. I'm going to put $20 on this. Nice Santana CD. Electric Light Orchestra, Discovery, which was quite popular. I'm going to put $20 on that. Then we get to one that's really a sign of the times. And then we get to a CD that just reminded me of how dated some of this stuff is. It is Quarter Flash by Quarter Flash. This one has condition issues, and I'm only going to list it for $8. I imagine the reason that the now sort of forgotten Quarter Flash made it into the first 50 is this is the lone Sony Columbia or Sony Epic that was on the Geffen label. And evidently, probably under the distribution agreement, Geffen was able to get one artist in there to promote them. The next one is by Willie Nelson. It's Always on My Mind. It was recorded originally around 1980. It is a great CD if you're into Willie. I am probably going to keep that one for my personal collection. I've collected records since the early to mid 70s, and I've collected CDs since the late 80s. And I like to take one when I find something, a wonderful find like this, even if I intend on reselling almost all of it. I like to take one or two and keep them as souvenirs, like the Halloween I showed you earlier. This is a good CD. If I was to list it, 18 to 20 bucks. So I'll include it in the total in case you don't, in case you're a reseller who doesn't collect, or you're a collector and you wonder what the haul is worth. Then we have Bob James, Hands Down. It's about a $24 CD. Then we have Wynton Marsalis's first solo LP. And it's $24 for that CD. Then we have Journey, Frontiers. And this has condition issues besides the crack on the front case. And I'm going to list it for about $8. Then Julio Iglesias, Momentos. And that is going to be about $20. Now let's get to the two prizes on the Sony list. This all brings us to the most valuable find in the haul. Believe it or not, Boston's Don't Look Back. I'm not a Boston fan. I bought the Boston first LP the day it came out. I believe I paid $3.99 for it. And a friend who's a musician who I did mixes for asked me that night what I thought of it. And I told him it's worth listening to once. But, you know, when you're out to resell something, it doesn't matter if you like it or not, as long as you know the subject. And this is a really interesting CD. This one's worth about $150. It's in VG plus condition, I'd say. Might need a little bit of resurfacing treatment or cleaning up. And there's no Obi to it. There's one listed as excellent condition, I believe no Obi, in France on Discogs. And before you get to the really high shipping charges, it's almost $200, 180 euros if I remember correctly. The one on eBay is a gold-faced one. The one on Discogs that I just mentioned for 180 euro is a silver-faced. But there is a gold-faced one wandering around if you wanted to buy it for $250, maybe $245. We're talking approximately here. I'll be throwing some comps up on the screen. Now, why is this CD special? Well, Don't Look Back has an interesting history. I'm going to read from Discogs. It was among the first commercially produced compact discs when the format was introduced in 1983. They're talking about the U.S. introduction in March of 1983, because this is in the first, not in the first 50, but it would have been in 83. It was got a really low catalog number. The original Japanese pressings have the little red dot, which stands for International Pop, have 35 8P-7. So this is an epic, and it's not in the first 5, it's in the next little grouping. They're probably released in Japan in November of 1982, would be my bet. There were legal issues, though, so the product was pulled very quickly. The title was pulled after a small production run and did not reappear on CD until 3 years later. And it's something to do with the artwork and the spaceship and a copyright dispute of some kind. Inserts for the original pressing contain the spaceship blueprints from the original album. Those illustrations were not included on the 1986 release. This is an original. If it was the 86 release, it would have a different catalog number. I've also checked the inside, what's on the hub. It's a 1A1. It's got the catalog number, and if I remember right, a 32 8P-7-0, so, or -1-0. Anyway, I'm ambling a bit there. Why would people, regardless of this just being in the first 50 and the artwork and being very scarce, why might somebody want it? The mix is different. Delp's lead vocals are not in the center. They're in normal stereo. And apparently this is, if I understand it correctly, I have not taken this and played it and compared it to a normal Boston mix done over at Denon for the re-release in 1986. This is the 83 or 82, depending on how you look at it, version. So there is a big difference in the mix, and over on Hoffman, a lot of people are adamant that this is the mix to have if you can find it, but that it's extremely difficult to get. Anyway, I was lucky to get my hands on a copy. I'm going to listen to it and compare it, and then I'm going to list it for $150 and let somebody else enjoy it, who will enjoy it much more than I will. The next and final CD in the International Pop CDs is one of the largest sellers of all time, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Apparently this has a very hot mix, forceful. You have to have the equipment to play it, and that's, I guess, a pre-in and a pre-out of some kind on it. So if somebody just ripped it on a computer and did not make adjustments for that, or tried to play it in a player that did not have that capability built into, I guess it's built into the oversampling these days, the vocals would sound high-pitched from what I've read. I'm sure that I have just butchered the technicalities of what's going on, but close enough. It is different, and you would not just throw it into any old player and expect it to play. I'm going to put $85 on this. This one's in really nice shape. It's an in-demand CD, and that's consistent with the market prices. Now let's go to some of them that are not Sony Epic and take other Japanese CDs and one German CD and take a look at the values on those. Two of the Japanese CDs that I found during the first 18 hours were Summertime by Mongo Santa Maria with Dizzy Gillespie, and it's at Montreux in 1980. It's only worth about $12. I want to listen to it. It sounds like a really interesting concert. And then there's Pablo Count Basie on the Road, and that should list for about $15. Another really interesting title, and you can, quite frankly, this one doesn't have all the Japanese writing on the back, but sure does on the spine if you take a look. Then there were two classical CDs. These were on Denon, I believe. This is PCM Digital. Okay, Denon's over there. Romantic Overtures by Ken Ichiro Kobayashi. I'm sure I did not get that correct either. And that is $10, regardless of my poor pronunciation of the conductor's name. Then there's Beethoven Symphony No. 5 by Ottmar Suttner. And it looks like a Berlin orchestra. And it is, more Japanese script on the side. And that is about $24. I never thought I'd be buying anything by our next artist, Mantovani, Digital Spectacular. $16 fine with the Japanese script all over the side. Then there were two more finds that I had subsequent to that initial burst, and I think some of it was just because I was looking in there and I probably discounted a Zubin Meta as being anything that would be Japanese, but it sure enough is a Japanese pressing. And according to the comps, this one's worth about $25. So the total for the Japanese CDs is $733. And during that initial burst, I found one more, Night in Tunisia by Art Blakey. And this is a West German pressing on Phillips, who also pressed a lot of early stuff. Remember I told you that Phillips was a little behind Sony in getting their manufacturing online, but they were there. I'm going to list it for about $20. Then we have a really interesting CD coming. This is going to be tricky to price. Remember I showed you a gold CD of real time, and I've told you that gold CDs are usually $75, $100 more than the regular. There are not any of the early gold or silver ones available anywhere on the web. Everything is a reissue on real time. And this is the original Sony manufactured, I imagine Sony mixed, from 1982, 83 type time frame. It says it is stamped on the hub, manufactured by Sony, or CBS Sony. I don't know what price to put on it. One version of the really late reissues goes for $10. Another reissue, maybe the reissue of this, goes for $25. But it's not one of the really early pressings. If I had to guess, $75, maybe $100. There just isn't one like this anywhere in the world. And when I say that, don't shout, "Hey, unknown flipper, you're charging way, way, way too much in your listing prices." Start high and you see whether the offers come in. You step it down with sales. You even on Discogs, nonetheless eBay, you have the opportunity to leave it open for offers, and you just go reasonably from there and see what happens. So far we have $753 in listings, plus whatever the unknown value is here that I haven't included in that title. So not counting the $24 on the Zubin Meta and the unknown amount for the real-time Hungarian Philharmonic, we have $708 in total listings from the Japanese pressings and the one West German pressing. And that's 26 CDs, and that is an average of $34.10. I'll do another video about how to spot these in the wild quickly, like feel them with your hands, see them by catalog number, certain telltale signs of especially the early Sonys, since I have a nice sample here to do a video. If you believe you benefited from this video, please hit like and consider subscribing to the channel.